Miguel Rodriguez stepped into his backyard pool and felt the cool water wash over his tired body. The Arizona sun was hot that Saturday afternoon, and the water felt perfect against his skin. He had been working so many hours at the hospital that he almost forgot what it felt like to relax. Miguel was a doctor. He worked at the biggest hospital in Phoenix, saving lives every day. People called him Dr. Rodriguez at work, but here in his backyard he was just a dad who wanted to spend time with his family. He had worked 12-hour shifts for the past 2 weeks. Today was his first day off in a long time. The pool was his favorite part of the house. When he and his wife Maria first bought this place 5 years ago, the pool was old and dirty. They spent months fixing it up. Miguel would come home from the hospital and work on the pool until it was dark. Maria would bring him cold drinks and tell him he was working too hard. But Miguel wanted everything to be perfect for his family. Now the pool sparkled blue in the sunlight. The water was always clean and warm. Miguel had installed special lights that made the water glow at night. His kids loved to swim in the evening when the lights came on. It was like having their own little piece of paradise. His son Carlos was 8 years old and loved to dive. He would spend hours practicing different dives from the diving board. Miguel had taught him how to dive safely. Carlos was getting really good at it. He could do a perfect cannonball that made a huge splash and got everyone wet. His daughter Sophia was 6 years old and still learning how to swim. She wore bright pink water wings and stayed in the shallow end. Miguel was teaching her how to float on her back. She was scared at first, but Miguel was patient with her. He would hold her gently and tell her she was safe. Sophia trusted her daddy completely. Maria was inside the house making lunch. Miguel could smell something delicious cooking. Maybe it was her famous chicken tacos. She always made the best food on his days off. Maria worked hard too. She was a teacher at the local elementary school. The kids loved her because she was kind and patient. Miguel floated on his back and looked up at the sky. There were no clouds today, just endless blue. A few birds flew overhead. He could hear his neighbors mowing their lawns and kids playing in other yards. It was the perfect Saturday in their quiet neighborhood. The house was everything Miguel had dreamed of when he first came to America. He grew up in a small town in Mexico where his family had very little money. His parents worked hard to send him to school. They believed education was the most important thing. Miguel studied every day and got the best grades in his class. When Miguel was 18, he came to America to go to college. He worked 2 jobs while studying to become a doctor. It was not easy. He missed his family back home. Sometimes he was so tired that he fell asleep while studying. But he never gave up on his dream. Medical school was even harder. Miguel studied for hours every day. He learned about the human body and how to help sick people. He wanted to save lives and make his parents proud. After many years of hard work, he finally became a doctor. Miguel met Maria during his last year of medical school. She was also studying to be a teacher. They fell in love and got married right after graduation. They moved to Phoenix because Miguel got a job at the hospital there. It was a good place to start their new life together. At first, they lived in a small apartment near the hospital. Miguel worked long hours and Maria taught at a school nearby. They saved every penny they could. They wanted to buy a house and start a family. It took them 3 years to save enough money for a down payment. When they found this house, they knew it was perfect. It had 4 bedrooms, a big kitchen, and a backyard with a pool. The neighborhood was safe and quiet. There were good schools nearby for their future children. The house needed some work, but Miguel and Maria were not afraid of hard work. They painted every room themselves. Miguel fixed the broken tiles in the kitchen. Maria planted flowers in the front yard. They bought furniture piece by piece as they could afford it. Every improvement made the house feel more like home. Carlos was born 2 years after they moved in. Miguel was working at the hospital when Maria went into labor. He almost missed the birth because he was in surgery. But he made it just in time to hold his son for the first time. It was the happiest day of his life. Sophia came along 2 years later. She was a tiny baby with big brown eyes like her mother. Miguel cried when he first saw her. He could not believe how lucky he was to have such a beautiful family. Now, floating in his pool on this perfect Saturday, Miguel thought about how far he had come. His parents would be so proud if they could see him now. He had a successful career, a loving family, and a beautiful home. All those years of hard work had been worth it. Carlos jumped into the pool with a big splash. The water went everywhere, getting Miguel completely wet. "Dad, watch this," Carlos shouted. He climbed out and did another dive. This one was even better than the last. Sophia giggled from the shallow end. She was practicing kicking her feet while holding onto the pool edge. "Look, Daddy, I'm swimming," she called out. Miguel swam over to her and gave her a big hug. "You're doing great, Princess," he told her. Sophia beamed with pride. She loved it when her daddy called her princess. Maria came outside carrying a tray of drinks. She had made fresh lemonade with ice. "Who wants a cold drink?" she called out. The kids cheered and swam to the edge of the pool. Miguel watched his wife set the drinks on the patio table. She was wearing a pretty sundress and had her hair pulled back. Even after all these years, she still took his breath away. He was the luckiest man in the world. The afternoon sun was getting warmer. Miguel decided to float for a few more minutes before getting out to eat lunch. He closed his eyes and listened to his children laughing and playing. This was what happiness felt like. This was what he had worked so hard for. He had no idea that in just a few minutes, everything would change. Miguel was still floating in the pool when he heard the back gate open. The metal hinges made a loud creaking sound. He opened his eyes and turned toward the noise. 2 police officers were walking into his backyard. The officers wore dark uniforms and had serious looks on their faces. One was tall and thin with short brown hair. His name tag said Johnson. The other officer was shorter and had dark skin. His name tag said Martinez. Both men had their hands near their guns. Miguel felt confused. Why were police officers in his backyard? He had not called them. Nothing was wrong. He stood up in the pool and watched the officers walk toward him. "Hey, you," Officer Johnson called out loudly. "What are you doing here?" His voice was harsh and unfriendly. He stopped at the edge of the pool and stared at Miguel. Miguel felt water dripping from his hair and body. He was just wearing swim shorts and felt very exposed. "I live here," he said calmly. "This is my house." Officer Martinez laughed in a mean way. "Yeah, right," he said. "We got a call about someone who doesn't belong here. You need to get out of that pool right now." Carlos and Sophia stopped playing and swam closer to their father. They looked scared. Sophia's bottom lip started to tremble like she might cry. Carlos moved protectively in front of his little sister. "Daddy, what's happening?" Sophia whispered. Her voice was so quiet that Miguel could barely hear her. She reached for his hand in the water. Miguel's heart started beating faster. He could see the fear in his children's eyes. "It's okay, kids," he said softly. "There's just been a mistake." But inside, he was getting angry. How dare these officers scare his children? Officer Johnson pointed at Miguel with his finger. "I said get out of the pool now." His voice was even louder this time. Some of the neighbors started looking over their fences to see what was happening. Miguel slowly walked to the pool steps. Water ran down his body as he climbed out. He felt embarrassed standing there in just his swim shorts while the officers stared at him. "Officers, I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said. "I am Dr. Miguel Rodriguez. I live here with my family." "Sure you do," Officer Martinez said with sarcasm in his voice. "And I'm the president. Let me see some ID." Miguel pointed toward the patio table where his wallet was sitting. "My identification is over there with my things," he said. "May I get it?" "Don't move," Officer Johnson shouted. He put his hand on his gun. "Martinez, go check his ID." "Officer." Martinez walked over to the table and picked up Miguel's wallet. He opened it and looked through it. Miguel watched him examine his driver's license and other cards. The officer's face showed he was reading Miguel's address, which matched where they were standing. "The ID says he lives here," Officer Martinez told his partner, but his voice still sounded doubtful, like he did not believe it. "IDs can be fake," Officer Johnson said. "This guy probably stole this wallet. Look at him." Does he look like he belongs in a house like this? Miguel felt his face get hot with anger. What did that mean? What was wrong with the way he looked? He was a successful doctor who had worked hard for everything he owned. He belonged here more than anyone. Maria came outside when she heard the loud voices. She was carrying a towel for Miguel, but she stopped when she saw the police officers. Her face went pale with fear. "What's going on?" Maria asked. She quickly walked to Miguel's side and handed him the towel. "Why are you here?" "Ma'am, we got a call about a suspicious person," Officer Johnson said. His voice was a little more polite when he talked to Maria. "Someone reported a man who didn't belong here." "That's my husband," Maria said firmly. "We live here. We have lived here for 5 years. Our children were born in this town." She pointed to Carlos and Sofia, who were still in the pool watching everything with wide, scared eyes. Officer Martinez looked at Maria suspiciously. "Can you prove you live here? Do you have any mail or bills with your name on them?" Maria looked confused. "Of course I can prove it, but why do I need to? We haven't done anything wrong. We were just enjoying our pool on a Saturday afternoon." "Just get the papers, lady," Officer Johnson said impatiently. "We need to check this out." Maria went inside the house to get some mail and documents. Miguel wrapped the towel around his waist and stood there dripping wet. He felt humiliated. His neighbors were now openly staring over their fences. Some had their phones out taking pictures or videos. Mrs. Peterson from next door was standing in her yard watching. Miguel had always been friendly to her. He had even helped her carry groceries when she hurt her back last year. But now she was just staring at him like he was a criminal. "Daddy, why are the police here?" Carlos asked quietly. He had climbed out of the pool and was standing next to his father. Water dripped from his small body. "I don't know, son," Miguel said honestly, "but everything will be okay." He hoped he was telling the truth. Nothing like this had ever happened to him before. Officer Johnson spoke into his radio. "We need backup at 1247 Maple Street," he said. "Possible break-in situation." Miguel's mouth fell open. Break-in? In his own house? This was getting crazy. "Officers, please," he said. "You're making a big mistake. I can call my colleagues at the hospital to verify who I am." "Yeah, right," Officer Martinez said. "Like we're going to believe your friends would lie for you." Maria came back outside with an armful of papers. She had mail, utility bills, and mortgage documents. All of them had their names and address on them. Some of the mail was from the hospital where Miguel worked. "Here," Maria said, handing the papers to Officer Martinez. "This should prove we live here." Officer Martinez looked through the papers slowly. Miguel could see him reading their names and address on every piece of mail. The mortgage papers clearly showed they owned the house. There were bills for electricity, gas, and water, all in their names. "These could be fake, too," Officer Johnson said when his partner showed him the papers. "People can make fake documents these days." Miguel could not believe what he was hearing. What more proof did they need? He owned this house. He paid taxes on it. His children played here every day. How could they not believe he belonged here? More police cars started arriving. Miguel heard sirens in the distance getting closer. His stomach felt sick. What had started as a perfect family day was turning into a nightmare. Sofia started crying in the pool. The sound broke Miguel's heart. His little princess was scared, and there was nothing he could do to make it better. Carlos swam over to comfort his sister, even though he looked scared too. Miguel realized this was about more than just proving where he lived. These officers had made up their minds about him the moment they saw him. They saw a Mexican man in a nice neighborhood pool and they decided he didn't belong there. Nothing he could say or show them would change their minds, but Miguel was not going to give up. He was a doctor, a father, and a homeowner. He had rights, and he was going to fight for them. 2 more police cars pulled up in front of Miguel's house. The sirens were loud and made Sofia cry even harder. Carlos got out of the pool and ran to his mother. His small body was shaking from fear and cold water. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," Officer Johnson commanded Miguel. His voice was cold and mean. "You're under arrest for trespassing." Miguel could not believe what was happening. "Officer, this is my home," he said loudly. "You cannot arrest me for being in my own backyard." His voice shook with anger and disbelief. "We'll see about that," Officer Martinez said. He pulled out handcuffs from his belt. The metal cuffs caught the sunlight and sparkled. "Turn around now or we'll make you turn around." Maria stepped forward with her hands up. "Please, officers," she begged. "Don't do this in front of our children. They're scared enough already." Tears were running down her face. "We have shown you proof that we live here. What more do you want?" "Step back, lady," Officer Johnson said harshly. "Don't interfere, or you'll be arrested too." Miguel's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. He looked at his crying children and his terrified wife. Then he looked at the neighbors who were all watching from their yards and windows. Some were taking pictures with their phones. Others were just staring like they were watching a movie. He thought about running, but he knew that would make things worse. He thought about fighting, but there were too many officers now. 4 more policemen had arrived and were walking into his backyard. All of them had their hands on their guns. Miguel slowly turned around and put his hands behind his back. The handcuffs felt cold and tight around his wrists. Officer Martinez pushed him down onto a patio chair. The metal was hot from the sun and burned his wet skin. "Daddy!" Sofia screamed from the pool. She tried to swim toward him, but Carlos held her back. "Don't hurt my daddy." Her little voice was breaking Miguel's heart. "It's okay, princess," Miguel called to her. "Daddy is fine. Just stay with Carlos." But he was not fine. He was humiliated and angry and scared. This was not supposed to happen in America. This was not supposed to happen to people who worked hard and followed the law. "Officer." Johnson started searching through Miguel's things on the patio table. He looked through his phone, his wallet, and even his sunglasses. He opened Miguel's medical bag that was sitting on another chair. "What's in here?" Officer Johnson asked, holding up a small bottle of pills. "Those are prescription medications," Miguel said. "I'm a doctor. I carry emergency supplies in case someone needs help." Officer Johnson laughed. "Right, a doctor, and I'm a brain surgeon." He put the pills in a plastic bag like they were evidence of a crime. Maria was getting more upset. "Those are legitimate medications," she said. "My husband is the head of emergency medicine at Phoenix General Hospital. You can call and verify it." "Sure he is," Officer Martinez said mockingly. "And you're probably a movie star." More neighbors came outside to watch. Miguel saw Mr. Thompson from across the street standing on his front porch. Miguel had helped Mr. Thompson when he had a heart attack last year. Miguel had performed CPR and saved his life. But now Mr. Thompson was just watching like Miguel was a stranger. Mrs. Garcia from down the street was there too. Miguel had delivered her baby in the back of an ambulance 2 years ago when she went into labor on the way to the hospital. But she was looking at him like she had never seen him before. Officer Johnson called someone on his radio. "We need to run a check on Miguel Rodriguez," he said. "Possible burglary suspect." He read out Miguel's information from his driver's license. Miguel sat in the hot chair with handcuffs cutting into his wrists. His swim shorts were still wet and uncomfortable. He felt exposed and embarrassed. All he had wanted was a quiet day with his family. Now he was being treated like a criminal in his own backyard. "Can I at least put on some clothes?" Miguel asked. "I'm half naked here. You should have thought about that before you decided to break into someone's pool," Officer Martinez said. Several of the other officers laughed. Miguel's anger was growing stronger. These officers were enjoying this. They liked humiliating him in front of his family and neighbors. They had decided he was guilty of something and nothing would change their minds. Maria went to get Miguel's cell phone from the table, but Officer Johnson stopped her. "Don't touch anything," he said. "This is all evidence now." "Evidence of what?" Maria demanded. "Evidence that my husband was swimming in his own pool? Evidence that we live in our own house?" Her voice was getting louder and more angry. "Evidence that someone was trespassing," Officer Johnson said. "Evidence that someone was using a pool that doesn't belong to them." Sophia had stopped crying but was still sniffling in the pool. Carlos was trying to be brave for his sister, but Miguel could see he was scared too. The poor kids didn't understand what was happening. How could they? Miguel didn't understand it either. A sergeant arrived and walked over to Officer Johnson. They talked quietly for a few minutes. Miguel could not hear what they were saying, but he hoped the sergeant would listen to reason. Maybe someone with more experience would see this was all a big mistake. But the sergeant just nodded and looked at Miguel like he was definitely a criminal. "Have you searched the house yet?" the sergeant asked. "We were waiting for more backup," Officer Johnson said. "The woman says she lives here too, but we think they might both be involved." Miguel's mouth fell open. Now they wanted to search his house? "You need a warrant to search my home," he said loudly. "Not if we have probable cause," the sergeant said. "And we have plenty of that." Miguel knew his rights. He had testified in court many times as an expert witness. He knew the law better than most people. "What probable cause?" he asked. "Being Mexican in my own backyard?" The sergeant's face turned red. "Watch your mouth," he said angrily. "This has nothing to do with race. This is about someone who doesn't belong here." But Miguel knew better. He had lived in America long enough to recognize prejudice when he saw it. These officers had looked at his skin color and decided he was guilty of something. They had made up their minds before they even talked to him. The radio crackled and someone gave Officer Johnson information about Miguel's background check. Miguel could not hear the details, but he saw Officer Johnson's face change. The officer looked confused and maybe a little worried. "What did they say?" the sergeant asked. Officer Johnson hesitated. He doesn't have any criminal record, and the address on his license matches this house. He's had this address for 5 years. The sergeant frowned. "That doesn't mean anything. Run a check on the house ownership." Miguel was getting tired of sitting in the hot sun with handcuffs on. His wrists were starting to hurt and his skin was burning. "Sergeant," he said calmly, "I am Dr. Miguel Rodriguez. I work at Phoenix General Hospital. I have lived in this house for 5 years with my wife and children. Someone called in a false report and you are wasting your time and embarrassing my family." "We'll be the judge of that," the sergeant said. But Miguel could see doubt in his eyes now. The man was starting to realize this might not be what it seemed. Officer Martinez came back from searching around the house. "I looked in all the windows," he told the sergeant. "The place looks lived in. There are family photos everywhere. Kids' toys. The refrigerator is full of food." Miguel felt a tiny bit of hope. Maybe now they would realize their mistake and let him go. Maybe this nightmare would finally end. But Officer Johnson was not ready to give up. "Those could all be fake," he said stubbornly. "These people are good at making things look real." Miguel closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He realized these officers were never going to admit they were wrong. They had gone too far to back down now. He was going to have to find another way to end this. Miguel sat in the burning hot chair and watched the police officers talk among themselves. His wrists hurt from the tight handcuffs, and his skin was getting red from the sun. But his mind was working clearly now. Years of dealing with life and death, situations in the emergency room had taught him how to stay calm when things got bad. He looked around his backyard and noticed things he had not seen before. One of the officers had stepped on Maria's flower bed and crushed her roses. Another officer had left the back gate wide open and their dog would probably run away. His phone was still on the patio table and he could see it buzzing with text messages. Miguel started thinking like the doctor he was. In the hospital, when a patient came in with a problem, he had to figure out what was really wrong. Sometimes, the obvious answer was not the right answer. Sometimes he had to look deeper to find the truth. What was really happening here? These officers had gotten a call about a suspicious person, but who had called and why? Miguel had lived in this neighborhood for 5 years. All his neighbors knew him. He had helped many of them when they had medical emergencies. He thought about Mrs. Henderson, who lived 2 houses down. Last month, her grandson had fallen off his bike and cut his head badly. Miguel had rushed over and stopped the bleeding until the ambulance came. The boy was fine because Miguel knew what to do. He thought about Mr. Williams, who lived across the street. Miguel had diagnosed his heart problems when they were just talking over the fence one day. Mr. Williams went to the doctor and found out Miguel was right. The early treatment probably saved his life. So who would call the police on him? And why? Today? Miguel looked at his children, who were still in the pool but staying very quiet. Sofia was holding on to Carlos like she was afraid to let go. They had never seen their father treated this way. They had never seen police officers act so mean to anyone. Carlos was 8 years old and smart for his age. Miguel could see him watching everything and trying to understand. The boy's face was serious and scared. This was not how children should learn about police officers. They should feel safe around cops, not terrified. Sofia was only 6 and did not understand much about what was happening. But she knew her daddy was in trouble, and that was enough to break her heart. She kept looking at him with big, sad eyes full of tears. Miguel thought about his job at the hospital. He was the head of emergency medicine, which meant he was responsible for saving lives every day. People trusted him with the most important thing they had, their health and their families' lives. He had worked so hard to earn that trust and respect. In the hospital, Miguel wore a white coat with his name on it. People called him doctor and listened when he spoke. He made quick decisions that meant the difference between life and death. Other doctors came to him for advice. Nurses respected his judgment. Patients thanked him for saving their lives. But here in his own backyard, wearing only swim shorts and handcuffs, he was being treated like a criminal. These officers did not care about his education or his job or his reputation. They only saw what they wanted to see. Miguel had grown up poor in Mexico, but his parents had taught him important lessons. They taught him to work hard, be honest, and treat people with respect. They taught him that education was the key to a better life. They taught him to never give up on his dreams. When Miguel first came to America, he did not speak English very well. Other students sometimes made fun of his accent. Some people treated him like he was stupid because he was learning the language. But Miguel studied harder than anyone else. He learned English perfectly. He graduated at the top of his medical school class. Miguel had faced discrimination before, but it was usually more subtle. A nurse who questioned his orders. A patient who asked for a real doctor. A colleague who acted surprised that Miguel was so smart. But this was different. This was public and humiliating and happening in front of his family. The sergeant was on his radio again, probably checking on the house ownership records. Miguel knew what they would find. His name and Maria's name were on the deed. They had a mortgage with the bank. They paid property taxes every year. Everything was legal and proper. Officer Johnson was looking through Miguel's medical bag again. Miguel watched him handle the emergency supplies carelessly. Those medications and instruments could save someone's life. They were not toys for a police officer to play with. "Be careful with that," Miguel said calmly. "Some of those medications are very expensive." "Shut up," Officer Johnson said without looking at him. "You don't get to give orders anymore." Miguel felt his anger rising again, but he forced himself to stay calm. Getting angry would not help his situation. It would just give the officers an excuse to treat him worse. He needed to think like a doctor, not like an angry man. In the emergency room, Miguel often dealt with difficult people, patients who were scared or angry or in pain, family members who blamed him when he could not save someone, insurance companies who questioned his decisions. Miguel had learned how to stay professional even when people were unfair to him. He thought about a time last year when a patient's family accused him of not caring. Because he was Mexican, they demanded a real American doctor. Miguel could have gotten angry or defensive. Instead, he calmly explained his qualifications and focused on helping their loved one. In the end, they thanked him for saving their family member's life. Maybe this situation was like that. Maybe these officers were just scared or confused. Maybe if he stayed calm and professional, he could help them understand their mistake. Miguel looked at Officer Martinez, who seemed a little less hostile than his partner. "Officer Martinez," he said quietly, "I know this looks strange to you, but I really am a doctor and this really is my home. Is there some way we can resolve this without traumatizing my children any further?" Officer Martinez glanced at the kids in the pool, then looked away quickly. Miguel could see that the man felt uncomfortable about what was happening. Maybe there was still hope. "Look, buddy," Officer Martinez said. "We're just doing our job. Someone called and said you didn't belong here. We have to check it out." "I understand that," Miguel said. "But you've checked it out. You've seen my identification, my mail, my mortgage papers. My wife has shown you proof that we live here. My children obviously know this place. What more evidence do you need?" Officer Martinez did not answer. He walked away to talk to the sergeant. Miguel watched them have a quiet conversation. The sergeant kept shaking his head and pointing at Miguel. Miguel realized that the sergeant was the real problem. Officer Johnson was just following orders, and Officer Martinez seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation. But the sergeant had made up his mind that Miguel was guilty of something, and he was not going to change it. Miguel thought about his options. He could keep arguing and probably make things worse. He could demand to call a lawyer, but that might take hours. His children would have to watch this whole nightmare continue, or he could try something different. Miguel was not just a doctor. He was a smart man who knew how to solve problems. Maybe it was time to start solving this one. Miguel took a deep breath and made his decision. He had been quiet long enough. It was time to take control of this situation. He looked directly at the sergeant, who was still talking on his radio. "Sergeant," Miguel called out in a clear, strong voice. "I need to speak with you privately for just one moment." The sergeant finished his radio call and walked over to Miguel. His face showed annoyance. "What do you want?" he asked rudely. Miguel looked up at him calmly. Despite being handcuffed and sitting in a chair, Miguel's voice was confident and professional. "Sergeant, before this goes any further, I think you should know exactly who I am." Yeah, the sergeant said. "You claim you're some doctor. We've heard it all before." Miguel smiled slightly. "I am Dr. Miguel Rodriguez, head of emergency medicine at Phoenix General Hospital. But more importantly for you, I believe I know Officer Johnson's partner, Officer Davidson." Officer Johnson stopped what he was doing and looked over at them. "What about Davidson?" he asked. Miguel spoke slowly and clearly. 2 months ago, Officer Davidson was brought to my emergency room with a gunshot wound to the chest. He was losing a lot of blood and was very close to dying. I was the surgeon who operated on him and saved his life." The sergeant's face changed slightly. Officer Johnson walked closer to hear better. "Davidson never mentioned any Mexican doctor," Johnson said suspiciously. "He was unconscious when he arrived," Miguel explained. "But his wife was there, a blonde woman named Susan. She was crying and very scared. I talked to her for a long time that night, explaining what we were doing to save her husband's life." Officer Johnson's eyes went wide. "How do you know about Susan?" he asked quietly. Miguel continued in his calm, professional voice. "Officer, Davidson had damage to his right lung and internal bleeding. We had to remove a bullet that was very close to his heart. The surgery took 4 hours. I stayed with him all night to make sure he was stable. Anyone could know that information," the sergeant said. But his voice was not as confident as before. Miguel shook his head. "Officer Davidson has a tattoo on his left shoulder that says, 'Forever Susan,' with a rose underneath it. His wife told me they got matching tattoos on their anniversary. She was worried the doctors would have to cut through it during surgery." Officer Johnson's mouth fell open. He pulled out his phone and quickly dialed a number. "Davidson? It's Johnson. I need to ask you something weird. Do you remember anything about the doctor who saved your life? Mexican guy, about 40 years. Old?" Miguel could not hear the other side of the conversation, but he watched Officer Johnson's face change from doubt to surprise to something that looked like fear. "Yeah," Johnson said into the phone. "Dr. Rodriguez. He's here." "What? Are you serious? Okay. I'll call you back." He hung up and stared at Miguel. "What did he say?" the sergeant demanded. Officer Johnson looked very uncomfortable. "He said Dr. Rodriguez is a hero. He said the man saved his life and was the best doctor he ever met. He said Dr. Rodriguez stayed up all night making sure he was okay even though his shift was over." The sergeant still looked doubtful. "So what? That doesn't prove this guy is the same doctor. Miguel decided to share one more detail that only the real Dr. Rodriguez would know. Officer Davidson's wife brought him a teddy bear to the hospital, he said quietly. A small brown bear wearing a police uniform. She said it was their good luck charm. Davidson kept it next to his bed the whole time he was recovering. Officer Johnson's face went completely white. He looked at Miguel like he was seeing a ghost. "Oh God," he whispered. "It really is him." "What's wrong with you?" the sergeant asked angrily. "So what if he's a doctor? That doesn't mean he lives here." But Miguel was not done yet. He had more cards to play. "Sergeant, I also think you should know that I have treated Police Chief Williams on several occasions. He comes to our hospital for his heart condition. We've had many conversations about community relations and police training." The sergeant's face turned red. "Chief Williams? You're lying," Miguel continued calmly. "Chief Williams has high blood pressure and takes medication for it. He's a very nice man who cares deeply about his officers. He often talks about wanting to improve relationships between police and the community. I think he would be very interested to hear about what's happening here today." "You're bluffing," the sergeant said, but Miguel could see doubt in his eyes. 3 weeks ago, Chief Williams came to the emergency room with chest pains, Miguel said. It turned out to be heartburn from eating too much spicy food at his daughter's birthday party. But he was scared it might be a heart attack. I stayed late to make sure he was okay, even though it was just indigestion. Officer Martinez had been listening to everything. "Sarge," he said quietly, "maybe we should call this in and double-check everything." "We don't need to call anyone," the sergeant snapped. But Miguel could see the man was getting nervous. Miguel decided to push a little harder. "Sergeant, I also want you to know that I regularly testify in court as an expert witness. I have testified in cases involving police procedures and use of force. I am very familiar with proper police protocol and citizens' rights." The sergeant's eyes narrowed. "Is that some kind of threat?" Miguel shook his head calmly. "It's not a threat, Sergeant. It's just information. I know that good police officers follow proper procedures. I know that they need probable cause to arrest someone. I know that they need a warrant to search someone's home. And I know the difference between legal police work and harassment." Officer Johnson was still staring at Miguel in shock. "Dr. Rodriguez, I'm so sorry," he started to say. "Don't apologize to him," the sergeant ordered. "We still don't know for sure that he lives here." Miguel looked at the sergeant with disappointment. "Sergeant, you have seen my identification, my mail, my mortgage papers, and my medical credentials. You have confirmation from your own officers about who I am. My children are here with me, calling me Daddy. My wife has shown you proof that we live here. What exactly do you think is happening? Do you think I'm some master criminal who has been planning this elaborate hoax for months?" The sergeant did not answer, but Miguel could see him starting to sweat in the hot sun. Miguel continued in his professional voice. "Or perhaps you think I stole this family's identity and moved into their house? And they what, just disappeared? And I learned all about their lives and their children and their neighborhood? And I also happen to be a doctor who works at the local hospital? Does that really seem likely to you?" Officer Martinez stepped forward. "Sarge, I think we need to uncuff him and apologize. This was obviously a mistake." "No," the sergeant said loudly. "We follow procedure. We verify everything." Miguel realized the sergeant was too proud to admit he was wrong. The man had gone too far to back down now. Miguel would have to try a different approach. Miguel realized that talking was not going to be enough. The sergeant was too stubborn to admit his mistake. It was time to take action. Miguel looked around his backyard and noticed something important. His neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was watching from her kitchen window, and she had her phone out. "Mrs. Chen," Miguel called out loudly. "Are you recording this?" Mrs. Chen opened her window. "Yes, Dr. Rodriguez," she called back. "I've been filming everything since the police arrived. This is terrible." The sergeant spun around and glared at the window. "Ma'am, please go back inside. This is police business." But Mrs. Chen did not move. "Dr. Rodriguez delivered my baby last year when I went into labor in my car," she shouted. "He's a wonderful man and a great neighbor. You should be ashamed of yourselves." Miguel felt a surge of hope. His neighbors were starting to speak up for him. "Mrs. Chen, could you please call my hospital and tell them what's happening?" he asked. "I already did," she replied. "I called Phoenix General and told them police officers were arresting their head of emergency medicine in his own backyard. They said they're sending someone right over." The sergeant's face turned even redder. "You had no right to interfere with the police investigation." But more neighbors were coming outside now. Mr. Peterson from next door walked over to the fence. "Officers, what are you doing to Dr. Rodriguez?" he asked. "This man saved my life when I had a heart attack. He's one of the best people in this neighborhood." "Stay back, sir," Officer Martinez said, but his voice was much more polite now. Mrs. Garcia came running up the street. "What's happening to Dr. Rodriguez?" she demanded. "He delivered my baby. He's a hero. Why do you have him in handcuffs?" Miguel looked at the sergeant, whose face was getting more uncomfortable by the minute. "Sergeant," Miguel said calmly, "as you can see, I am well known in this neighborhood. These people are my friends and patients. Does this look like the situation you were called to investigate?" The sergeant did not answer, but Miguel could see him starting to panic. More cars were pulling up to the house. Miguel recognized one of them as belonging to Dr. Sarah Johnson, the hospital administrator. Dr. Johnson got out of her car and walked quickly toward the backyard. She was a tall woman with gray hair who commanded respect wherever she went. When she saw Miguel sitting in handcuffs, her face filled with anger. "What in the world is going on here?" Dr. Johnson demanded. She walked right up to the sergeant without any fear. "Why is Dr. Rodriguez restrained? This is absolutely outrageous." The sergeant tried to maintain his authority. "Ma'am, we're conducting a police investigation. Please step back." Dr. Johnson laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. "A police investigation of what? Dr. Rodriguez is the head of emergency medicine at the largest hospital in this city. He's one of the most respected doctors in Arizona. He lives in this house with his family. What exactly are you investigating?" "Someone called in a suspicious person report," the sergeant said defensively. "Suspicious?" Dr. Johnson's voice got louder. "The only thing suspicious here is why you have a prominent community member handcuffed in his own backyard while his children watch in terror." Miguel decided it was time to take full control. "Sergeant," he said in his most professional voice, "I want you to listen very carefully. I am going to explain exactly what has happened here, and then you are going to make a decision about how you want this to end." The sergeant started to interrupt, but Miguel continued speaking in a voice that commanded attention. "Someone in this neighborhood called in a false report about me. They saw a Mexican man in a swimming pool and decided I didn't belong here. You responded to that call without doing any proper investigation." "Now wait just a minute," the sergeant began. Miguel kept talking. "You arrived at my home and immediately treated me like a criminal. You refused to believe my identification. You dismissed proof that I live here. You handcuffed me in front of my children without probable cause. You have violated multiple police procedures and my civil rights." Officer Martinez was nodding slightly. Officer Johnson looked like he wanted to disappear. The sergeant's face was bright red with anger and embarrassment. Miguel continued in his calm, professional tone. "I have been recording this entire incident on my home security system. Dr. Johnson is here as a witness. Multiple neighbors have been filming with their phones. Your own officers can confirm my identity. You now have a choice to make." "What choice?" the sergeant asked through gritted teeth. Miguel looked directly into his eyes. "You can continue with this charade and face the consequences. I will file formal complaints with your department, the city, and the Civil Rights Commission. I will hire lawyers and sue you personally in the police department. This story will be on the news tonight and in the newspapers tomorrow. Your career will be over." The sergeant's hands were shaking slightly now. Miguel's voice remained calm and steady. "Or you can admit you made a mistake, uncuff me immediately, and apologize to my family. You can use this as a learning experience and make sure it never happens again. You can choose to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem." Dr. Johnson stepped forward. "Sergeant, I strongly advise you to listen to Dr. Rodriguez. He is not just a doctor. He's also served as an expert witness in multiple police misconduct cases. He knows the law better than most lawyers. And I can tell you that our hospital will support him completely in any legal action he chooses to take. The sergeant looked around at all the faces staring at him. Neighbors with phones, recording everything. A respected hospital administrator backing up Miguel's story. His own officers who were starting to look embarrassed about the whole situation. Miguel watched the sergeant's face and saw the exact moment when the man realized he had lost. The fight went out of his eyes, and his shoulders slumped slightly. "Officer Martinez," the sergeant said quietly. "Uncuff Dr. Rodriguez." Officer Martinez quickly walked over and unlocked the handcuffs. Miguel rubbed his sore wrists and stood up slowly. His legs were stiff from sitting in the chair for so long. "Dr. Rodriguez," the sergeant said reluctantly, "there seems to have been a misunderstanding." Miguel looked at him calmly. "Yes, Sergeant, there certainly has been." He walked over to his children, who immediately ran to him and hugged him tightly. "Daddy, are you okay?" Sophia asked, her voice still shaky from crying. "I'm fine, Princess," Miguel said softly, holding both his children close. "Everything is going to be okay now." But Miguel knew this was not over yet. He had won this battle, but there were still things that needed to be addressed. The sergeant had called this a misunderstanding, but Miguel knew exactly what it really was. And he was not going to let it slide. Miguel stood up and looked at all the police officers in his backyard. The handcuffs were off, but he was not done with this situation. His children were still scared, his wife was still shaking, and his neighbors were still watching. This was far from over. "Sergeant," Miguel said in his calm, professional voice, "I want to make sure I understand what just happened here. You received a call about a suspicious person. You came to my home without doing any investigation first. You refused to believe my identification, my proof of residence, or testimony from my neighbors. You handcuffed me in front of my family and threatened to search my home without a warrant. Is that an accurate summary?" The sergeant shifted uncomfortably. "Dr. Rodriguez, we were just following standard procedure." "No," Miguel interrupted firmly. "That was not standard procedure. That was racial profiling, and we both know it." The word racial hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. All the officers looked uncomfortable. Some of the neighbors nodded in agreement. Dr. Johnson crossed her arms and stared at the sergeant. Miguel continued speaking in his clear, professional voice. "Someone saw a Mexican man in this neighborhood and decided he didn't belong here. They called you with a false report. And instead of investigating properly, you believed them immediately because it fit your own prejudices. Now—" "Hold on," Officer Johnson started to say. Miguel turned to look at him directly. "Officer Johnson, you told me that people can fake identification documents. You said these papers could all be forged. You said I probably stole this wallet. You suggested that my wife and I were both criminals involved in some elaborate scheme. Does that sound like reasonable police work to you?" Officer Johnson could not meet Miguel's eyes. We were just being thorough," he mumbled. "Thorough?" Miguel's voice rose slightly for the first time. "You were so thorough that you didn't bother to check property records before arresting the homeowner. You were so thorough that you ignored multiple forms of identification. You were so thorough that you dismissed testimony from neighbors who know me. That's not thorough, Officer Johnson. That's incompetent." Dr. Johnson stepped forward to support Miguel. "Officers, Dr. Rodriguez is not just any citizen. He's a prominent member of this community. He saves lives every day. He's helped many of your fellow officers and their families. The fact that you treated him this way is absolutely disgraceful." Miguel pulled out his phone, which had been buzzing with messages the whole time. "I have 17 missed calls and 43 text messages," he said. "Word is spreading about what happened here today. My colleagues at the hospital are asking if I'm okay. Local news reporters are calling for interviews. This story is going to be everywhere by tonight." The sergeant's face went pale. "Dr. Rodriguez, surely we can work this out quietly. There's no need to involve the media." Miguel looked at him with disappointment. "Sergeant, you had the chance to work this out quietly. That was when you could have listened to me explain who I was. That was when you could have accepted my identification and proof of residence. That was when you could have treated me with basic human dignity. But you chose not to do any of those things. Officer Martinez, who had been quiet for most of the incident, finally spoke up. Dr. Rodriguez, I want to apologize. I should have spoken up sooner. I knew this didn't feel right, but I went along with it anyway. That was wrong of me. Miguel nodded at him. Officer Martinez, I appreciate your honesty, and I want you to think about why you didn't speak up sooner. What does that tell you about the culture in your department? Officer Martinez looked ashamed. It tells me we have a problem, he said quietly. Miguel walked over to where his phone was sitting on the patio table. Several officers had been going through his personal belongings and everything was scattered around. You went through my private medical bag, he said. You treated legitimate prescription medications like they were illegal drugs. You handled my professional equipment carelessly. Some of this equipment is used to save lives. He picked up a small medical device that was now cracked. This pulse oximeter is broken now. It's used to measure oxygen levels in patients who can't breathe properly. How many people might suffer because you damaged equipment that could help them? The sergeant was sweating heavily now. We'll pay to replace anything that was damaged, he said quickly. This isn't about money, Sergeant, Miguel replied. This is about respect and professionalism and treating people fairly regardless of their skin color. More cars had arrived. Miguel saw a news van pulling up across the street. A reporter and camera crew got out and started setting up. The sergeant noticed them too and looked even more panicked. Miguel decided it was time to make his position clear. Sergeant, I want you to understand something. I'm not angry because you made a mistake. Police officers are human and humans make mistakes. I'm angry because you refused to admit your mistake even when presented with overwhelming evidence. I'm angry because you let your prejudices override your training and common sense. Dr. Johnson added her voice to Miguel's. The hospital board is going to want a full explanation of this incident. Dr. Rodriguez is one of our most valuable employees. When our staff members are mistreated by police, it affects our ability to serve the community. Miguel looked at his children, who were still staying close to him. Carlos, Sofia, I want you to remember what happened here today. I want you to remember that sometimes people will treat you unfairly because of how you look, or where your family comes from. But I also want you to remember that you should never accept that treatment. You should stand up for yourselves and fight for what's right. Carlos nodded solemnly. He was old enough to understand most of what had happened. Sofia just held onto her father's hand tightly. Miguel turned back to the sergeant. I'm going to file formal complaints about this incident, not because I want to hurt anyone's career, but because this kind of behavior has to stop. Other families shouldn't have to go through what my family went through today. Dr. Rodriguez, please, the sergeant said desperately. Can't we handle this internally? I promise there will be consequences for the officers involved. Miguel shook his head. Sergeant, internal handling is how problems like this continue to exist. If there are no public consequences, nothing changes. Other officers think this behavior is acceptable. Community members lose trust in the police. Everyone suffers. The reporter from the news station was now at the front gate, trying to get closer to hear what was happening. The sergeant noticed and looked even more worried. Miguel made his final point. Officers, you have a choice to make going forward. You can learn from this experience and become better police officers. You can treat all citizens with respect regardless of their race or ethnicity. You can follow proper procedures and investigate before making assumptions. Or you can continue doing things the way you've always done them and face more situations like this one. He paused and looked at each officer individually. But understand this. I will not be the last person to stand up to this kind of treatment. The community is watching you now. People have cameras and lawyers and voices. The days of getting away with racial profiling are ending. Miguel's phone rang. He looked at the caller ID and saw it was Police Chief Williams. Miguel looked at his phone and saw the name Chief Williams on the screen. He answered the call and put it on speaker so everyone could hear. Dr. Rodriguez, this is Chief Williams. I just heard about what happened at your home. Are you and your family okay? Miguel looked directly at the sergeant while he answered. We're okay, Chief Williams, but it was a very traumatic experience for my children. Your officers handcuffed me in my own backyard and treated me like a criminal for swimming in my own pool. There was a long pause on the phone. Dr. Rodriguez, I am deeply sorry this happened to you. This is not how we train our officers to behave. Sergeant Martinez, are you there? The sergeant looked confused. Yes, Chief, I'm here. But I'm Sergeant Wilson, not Martinez. I don't care what your name is, Sergeant, Chief Williams said angrily. You and your officers need to leave Dr. Rodriguez's property immediately and report to my office. We're going to have a very serious conversation about proper police procedures. Sergeant Wilson's face went white. Chief, we can explain. The only explanation I want to hear is in my office, Chief Williams interrupted. Dr. Rodriguez, again, I apologize for this incident. You can expect a full investigation and appropriate consequences for the officers involved. Miguel nodded, even though the chief could not see him. Thank you, Chief Williams. I appreciate your quick response to this situation. After Miguel hung up the phone, the officers started walking toward the gate to leave. But Miguel was not finished yet. Sergeant Wilson, before you go, I want you to do something for me, Miguel said. The sergeant stopped and turned around reluctantly. I want you to look at my children, Miguel continued. Really look at them. Carlos is 8 years old, and Sofia is 6. Today they watched police officers handcuff their father for no reason. They watched you treat their daddy like a criminal. They were scared and confused and didn't understand why this was happening. Miguel's voice became more emotional as he spoke. Those children will remember this day for the rest of their lives. Every time they see a police officer, they will remember how frightened they felt today. You have damaged their trust in the people who are supposed to protect them. Sergeant Wilson looked at the children who were still holding on to their father. Sofia was sucking her thumb, something she only did when she was very scared. Think about that when you go home to your own children tonight, Miguel said. Think about how you would feel if someone treated your kid's father the way you treated me today. Officer Johnson stepped forward. Dr. Rodriguez, I have a little girl about Sofia's age. I'm really sorry she had to see this. I'm sorry we scared her. Miguel nodded. Officer Johnson, I hope you remember this feeling the next time you respond to a call like this. I hope you ask more questions and make fewer assumptions. The news reporter had somehow gotten into the backyard and was now filming everything. Miguel decided to use this opportunity to send a message to the whole community. I want everyone watching this to understand something important, Miguel said, looking directly at the camera. What happened here today was not about one bad police officer or one racist neighbor. This was about a system that allows people to be treated differently based on their race and ethnicity. The reporter held her microphone closer to catch every word. Miguel continued speaking clearly and calmly. I was lucky today. I had the education and knowledge to defend myself. I had respected colleagues who came to support me. I had neighbors who knew me and spoke up for me. But what about people who don't have those advantages? What happens to them when they face this kind of treatment? Dr. Johnson nodded in agreement. Dr. Rodriguez is right. This incident highlights a much bigger problem in our community. Miguel looked around at all the people gathered in his backyard. Police officers, neighbors, hospital staff, and reporters. I don't want revenge against these officers. I want change. I want better training for police. I want citizens to speak up when they see injustice. I want children like mine to grow up in a world where they're judged by their character, not their skin color. Over the next few hours, Miguel's story spread across social media and local news. Videos taken by neighbors showed the whole incident from beginning to end. People were shocked to see how a respected doctor had been treated in his own home. The story made national news within days. Miguel was invited to speak on television programs about racial profiling and police reform. He used every opportunity to advocate for better police training and community relations. Sergeant Wilson was suspended without pay and eventually fired from the police department. Officer Johnson received a formal reprimand and was required to attend sensitivity training. Officer Martinez requested to be transferred to a different unit and became an advocate for police reform within the department. The neighbor who had made the false report was identified through the 911 call records. It was Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who lived 3 houses down. When reporters tried to interview her, she refused to comment, and eventually put her house up for sale. She moved away quietly a few months later. Miguel decided to donate the money from his lawsuit settlement to organizations that fight racial discrimination and provide legal help to people who can't afford lawyers. He wanted to make sure other families had the resources to defend themselves if they faced similar situations. Chief Williams implemented new training programs for all police officers, focusing on unconscious bias and proper investigation procedures. Miguel was invited to speak to police recruits about community relations and treating all citizens with respect. The incident brought the neighborhood closer together in unexpected ways. Neighbors who had never talked to each other before started having conversations about race and discrimination. Some admitted they had made unfair assumptions about their neighbors based on appearance. Others shared their own experiences with prejudice. Miguel's children needed counseling to help them process what they had experienced. Carlos asked many questions about why the police officers had been so mean to his daddy. Sophia had nightmares for several weeks and was afraid whenever she saw police cars. But Miguel used the experience as a teaching moment for his kids. He explained to them that most police officers are good people who want to help, but sometimes even good people make mistakes based on fear or misunderstanding. He taught them about the importance of standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. A year later, Miguel still lived in the same house with the same pool, but now it meant something different to him. It was no longer just a place to relax with his family. It had become a symbol of dignity, justice, and the importance of fighting for what's right. Miguel continued working as a doctor, saving lives every day. But he also became a voice for change in his community. He spoke at schools, churches, and community meetings about the importance of treating everyone with respect. The pool that had been the center of so much controversy became a gathering place for neighborhood events. Miguel and Maria hosted barbecues where people from different backgrounds came together to talk and get to know each other better. On quiet Saturday afternoons, Miguel still floated in his pool and watched his children play. But now he also thought about all the people who had supported him during his difficult time. He thought about the importance of speaking up against injustice, and he thought about the kind of world he wanted to leave for his children. The incident had been traumatic and unfair, but it had also shown Miguel the power of standing up for himself and his family. It had brought positive changes to his community and helped other people who faced similar challenges. Miguel had turned the tables on injustice, not through anger or revenge, but through dignity, knowledge, and the support of good people who believed in doing what's right.